I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Mr. Sharp, I recognize that you have only been the CEO a little less than 3 years, and I remember the commitments that you have made, and I'm listening to what you consider has been your progress since you've been there. Your commitment was to clean up the culture of corruption that existed in Wells Fargo. Since you last testified, the OCC fined your bank $250 million for violating a previous consent order regarding risk management and for engaging in unsafe and unsound practices related to serious deficiencies in your home lending loss mitigation program. In May 2022, the New York Times reported that current and former employees of Wells Fargo described hiring practices that led to fake job interviews so that internal diversity goals could be achieved. A 2021 report by the Committee for Better Banks found Wells Fargo failed to sufficiently disclose employment diversity data, making it impossible to examine advancement opportunities for workers of color. One Wells Fargo employee, Ted Laurel, who is a call center worker in San Antonio, Texas, responded to the last report saying, and I quote, "It's extremely deflating to be a person of color at Wells Fargo. In the past couple of years, I've watched a handful of Black managers at Wells Fargo get fired or leave," quote unquote. Mr. Sharp, I know the bank has made various commitments to address the racial wealth gap, and you have finally agreed to do a racial equity audit. I also appreciate that Wells Fargo is one of the few banks that have maintained a presence in the Caribbean as a correspondent bank, while, of course, we had Citi who responded to us when we were in Barbados that they had closed their correspondent banking operations. And so I do appreciate. But it is not all clear that you're doing enough to finally break the pattern of repeat offenses. To take another example, a Bloomberg investigation found that Wells Fargo approved fewer than half of Black homeowners who applied for mortgage refinancing in 2020, the worst Black approval rate compared to other major lenders. I know you will point to things like FICO score, requirements of the GSEs, but this doesn't fully explain why your bank was comparatively worse in this mark compared to other major lenders. When you look at this track record and when you hear feedback like that from your own employees, what is your assessment of your performances since you last testified before us? And so, you gave us some indication, but would you respond to the fines and the criticisms at this point?
Chairwoman, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to address those things. I was brought in to bring about substantial change at Wells Fargo, and we have made tremendous changes. I've also been very clear since the day I arrived, including when I testified in front of this committee in March of 2020, that it was going to take multiple years to make all of the changes that were necessary so that the company was run in a way that I'd be proud of, our regulators would be proud of, and you'd be proud of. We've closed 4 consent orders since I've been there. We have returned our CRA rating to outstanding. We have plans in place for all of the remediation work that has to take place, and I firmly believe that we are making progress across that body of work. And as I said in my remarks, I'm very confident that we've got the team in place, but that we also have the processes, the discipline, and the sense of urgency to get done what is needed.
If I may interrupt you, will you respond to the accusation of fake interviews? What does that mean to you? And I think you've heard this criticism.
Congresswoman, no one should go through an interview without the belief that they could have a reasonable shot at getting that job. We firmly believe that having a policy in place that requires diverse candidates helps us attract the best candidate. We believe that that's, in fact, what the policies that we put in place is happening, and that's the reason why our diverse hiring is up substantially since we put these policies in place. And to the extent that anyone feels as if they've not been treated properly, That's something that's on our management team to ensure it doesn't happen.
Is it true that you interviewed African-American employee for a position after you had already hired a white employee? Is that true?
Chairwoman, we're in the middle of continuing an investigation to make sure that we understand every instance where people felt as if they were not treated fairly. And if we have findings, we will take the appropriate action.